everybody, my name is Ling Ming. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about mathematics and some of the very basics that you need to know when you're learning pre-algebra. So today we're going to be learning about decimals and fractions, which are two most common phenomenon when you talk about mathematics that you must know. Now, alright, first, let's talk about what is fraction first. Since fraction is the way for us to write and to represent rational number. What is rational number? Okay, so rational number is a phrase when you talk about the numbers that can be represented by fractions, which means that it can be represented in this formula. And rational numbers includes all forms of number. It could be fraction, it could be decimals, it could be natural numbers, it could be positive number, the zero number, or the negative number. So that is the combination of rational numbers that you guys would see it a lot of times when you're learning mathematics. Now, first, let's look at fraction exactly. Fraction is represented by this way, and you could represent it in a lot of other ways. For example, you could represent it as a ratio, A divided by B, or A ratio to B. Secondly, you could present it as this, A and slash and B. Or you could say A over B, which is the most common way that we see a lot of time because it's the most common in mathematics. And so here, I'm going to be using this throughout the video. So now, A over B, this line right here basically means division or divided by. And so this whole thing could be equals to a number, which here I'll call x. And that x number is what we call as a decimal. So decimal is written like this. It represents a number. The first part is the whole number, and the second part is the decimal number. And it's divided by this dot. You guys see it? And so here, when you guys look into a decimal, you guys could add in unlimited zeros after all of those numbers of B, and it could still mean the same. So now, there are two types of decimals. We have terminating decimals, which are decimals that have a finite amount of numbers, or repeating decimals. And what are they? Let me show you. So first, how do we turn a fraction into a decimal? We do the cowboy technique. Now, imagine this is our fraction. Oops. The ink is not working. Okay, here we have is the cowboy technique. So here we have A over B. And so we could turn that into a long division. How do we do that? Imagine the cowboy goes on top of the horse, right? Since the cowboy is riding the horse. And so after a long day, the cowboy would go inside the house while the horse would stay outside as the stable. So we will put B over here like that. And then here comes our answer to the decimal. So to the equation, to the problem. So now let's do some practice division problems. Okay, so continuing on, here you guys could see. For example, let's talk about this pi over here. You see this pi a lot when you're talking about fractions. For example, this is a pie that I've bought for my whole family for Christmas this year. And so I'm so confused. My family has 8 members, right? Each one gets to eat one piece. So I get to eat one piece of the pie, which is this piece. So I got one piece out of 8 pieces, and 8 is the whole number, the whole pie. So that means our fraction here is 1 over 8. Okay, and now I want to talk to my parents in a cooler way. I want to talk in decimals. I want to tell people how much of the pie do I have in decimals. So now I'm gonna need to turn this 1/8 into a decimal. So as I've said earlier, here we have is 1/8, right? Now 1 is the cowboy, 8 is the horse, and so we write the division problem as 1 is inside and 8 is outside, and here upon is our answer. So now we do the long division, what I know you guys probably would know how to do. The 8 cannot go into 1, so we need to borrow a 0, right? And so we borrow a 0 right there. We write that decimal before we borrow a 0. Remember that? And then we see 10, 8 goes into 10 one time. So we have over here is 1. We minus 1 times 8 equals 8. And so we minus that out, we get 2. Now 8 cannot go into 2. So we have to borrow another 0. Remember how I said earlier that we could add as much zeros as we can to the after of the decimal, and it still will have the same value, right? So now I could add in additional zeros here to this one of mine, and so here I have 20, and so 28 goes into 22 times. So remember, when I borrow it, I put this decimal dot here. I also have to put it on my answer. So I put it here, and then since 8 goes into 22 times, I'm going to write 2. 2 times 8 equals 16. We minus that out, we got 4. Now 4, we borrow another 0. 8 goes into 45 times, right? And so we got in the final place 5 times 8 equals 40, and there we have the final answer, which 8 with 1/8 equals to 0.125. Okay, so what are we doing wrong here is that since we're borrowing the decimal dot, we have to put it over here, right? And so that equals here into our answer, which is 1/8 is equal to 0.125, or you could read as 0.125. And that is how we learn about decimals and fraction and how to convert a fraction into a decimal using the cowboy technique. And so you guys can see here, we have is our terminating decimals, which means that our number only ends here. Easy, right? Thank you for listening and goodbye.